Hello and welcome to the Joe Ligato Show. I'm your host, Dr. Joe Ligato, and today we're going to be reviewing a Twitter thread that provides this person's belief about various countries and what they think of the ongoing situation in Palestine. And the last time I went over their thread on various countries, I thought they were relatively accurate. So let's see what has changed, what has been updated since the last time that they've talked about this. So this is at Odd Things Online saying, here's another insight on what the regional Muslim governments are thinking about the Palestine-Israel situation, the Gaza genocide. He goes on to say the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, is continuing the policy of trying to become a Middle Eastern Switzerland. Influencers and religious leaders still being told to discourage boycotts and protests. Many key thinkers and analysts still believe the country is the victim of an Iranian Muslim Brotherhood conspiracy to derail their economy and ties with Israel. I don't believe that because of the fact that Iran and Muslim Brotherhood aren't particularly close allies. They fought on opposite sides of the Syrian conflict, and so them working together, sure, they're working together for the sake of Palestine and for the sake of stopping the Israeli genocide of the Muslim population, but are they working against a UAE? Absolutely not. And that's just Western propaganda that apparently UAE has bought into, if this person is to be believed. To counter this pressure, Dr. Ali Rashid Al-Nuami, chairman of the UAE's Federal National Council's Defense, has stated the Abraham Accords are here to stay, which is sad because that's not something that should be here to stay, because Israel should not be a state that exists. The people should be fine. They should just move back to Europe. But Israel as a state, or they should be absorbed into Palestine. Israel as a state has no right to exist. The country has focused on spearheading efforts in the United Nations. Oh, and I should say it has no right to exist because it's genocidal, it's an apartheid state, it's colonialist in nature, etc., etc. The country has focused on spearheading efforts in the UN in support of Palestine and is conducting food and monetary aid drives. However, the country seems to be militarily aligning with Israel and fears the destruction of its key assets in a bigger war, hence willing to work with the United States in regards to air defense systems. So they, unfortunately, have not been supporting their fellow Muslims, which would be the just thing to do here. Saudi Arabia is kind of in a similar situation and deeply disappointing here. Saudi Arabia, the country is still focused on its Vision 2030 program and has continued with numerous events, including Shakira's concert, despite calls to cancel these. Due to increased pressure, MBS has relaxed measures to allow mosques, including Mecca, to make prayers for the Palestinians. That's good. It has conducted very large monetary fundraise. Despite immense pressure to not do so, the country has informed the White House that it wants to continue its normalization process with Israel once the war is ended. So they don't care at all about the Palestinians. And this is the protectors of the two most holy sites in Islam not caring about the third most holy site, the Al-Aqsa Mosque in that land. So just really disappointing to see that from Saudi Arabia here. So Saudi Arabia also fears a larger war breakout that puts its assets like oil plants, desalination plants, air and seaports under fire. To this end, it has intercepted Yemeni missiles shot towards Israel over its airspace and rejected a temporary truce with the Yemenis Houthis. So they're not even willing to call a truce with these Shia militias in Yemen in order to help save the Palestinians from being genocided. Again, really bad strategic move by MBS here. MBS is also alleged to have told Lindsey Graham that he does not support a direct war with Iran, but will not stand in America's way if one were to break out. Again, another really strategic error on MBS's part, because I've been thinking of him as a really strategic genius in recent years. And so for him to do this, it just doesn't make sense, because if you are playing two-dimensional chess instead of three or four-dimensional chess, then you might think, oh, MBS saying the United States should take out one of its competitors, Iran, that's a good thing. Well, the thing is, if you're having the United States take out the competitors in the region, eventually they're going to come for you, particularly since the United States has talked nonstop about Saudi Arabia and its human rights abuses, supposed human rights abuses. And so if it comes down to it and Saudi Arabia and Israel are the only powers in the region, what do you think is going to happen to Saudi Arabia if the United States has the opportunity to take it out? Obviously, it's going to take it out at the behest of Israel. And so just Saudi Arabia is not thinking long term in this regard. So Saudi Arabia is apparently continuing to put the bulk of its efforts in the United Nations to solve the crises. Bahrain, so if I remember correctly, Bahrain is a country where the population is majority Shia, but the leaders are majority Sunni. Let's see what is happening in Bahrain. The country is continuing the policy of do little and don't be seen, and is waiting for the war to be over. Yeah, they're a very small country, kind of what I expected. It was alleged that it recalled its ambassadors and severed economic ties with Israel, but Israeli officials are contradicting that. They say it's not true and that relations are stable. To this effect, the Bahraini finance minister has recently stated on the Abraham Accords, the region needs bridges that transcend religious and ethnic lines in order to ensure security and prosperity. So, unfortunately, they're not doing what they can to help the Palestinians, meaning the Accords are here to stay. There are still significant public pressure to support the Palestinians and to take action. As yet, the country is involved in back-channel diplomacy, but there's ambiguity in which direction these will head. Okay, Qatar. So Qatar is considered to be the primary backer of Hamas. If you're listening to Western media, you probably assume the main backer is Iran, but it is not. The country, Qatar, is significantly involved in hostage negotiations and mediation between Hamas and the Israeli-U.S. government. So I like how they use those pretty much interchangeably because America is a Zionist-occupied government. Qatar currently faces immense pressure from the U.S. to censure Al Jazeera, which is their news station, and to close Hamas office. However, Qataris are resisting and do not believe that either of these measures will be useful. Currently, there are protests and rallies within the country to support Palestine, and government officials are also issuing condemnations of Israel's military campaign. It is closely involved in diplomatic efforts, with its foreign minister visiting Amman for discussions with other Arab partners and U.S. Secretary Blinken. Government officials and analysts have signaled they are willing to support the Palestinians in whatever form may be required going forward. Okay. So Qatar still on the side of the Palestinians, doing the best it can, but it is just a small Gulf state. Let's look at Oman. Oman is the country is trying to balance both internal and external pressures. You don't really hear much from Oman. I had a friend who visited, lived in Oman for a little while. It tends to stay pretty peaceful. There have been significant large protests and rallies in support of Palestine, and the country has closed its airspace to Israeli flights. Okay, that's good. It has also labeled Israel's actions war crimes and demanded an international investigation. Great from Oman. However, it is working alongside the UAE to implement a broad set of policies that will not jeopardize its normalization plans with Israel. So just playing both sides here when a genocide is going on, it's just disappointing to see that there's this decoupling between what the Muslim community wants and what the Muslim leadership is doing. And it should show you that Muslim leadership is completely controlled by the West, that it's not really doing what is in the benefit of the people, is of the will of the people. So next up is Kuwait, and Kuwait really surprised me. One of the most unique exceptions in the Middle East is the country Kuwait is in full support of the Palestinian cause. It has organized large rallies in support of the Palestinians and is providing medical aid and has promised to provide financial, diplomatic, and other support to the Palestinians. The country is known for its rejection of the Abraham Accords, and recently, Kuwaiti Member of Parliament Abdul Karim has publicly criticized other Arab rulers for not supporting the Palestinians and generally adopting a weak stance to conflict. So I was very surprised by this because I thought Kuwait was more controlled by the United States, but they seem to have a lot of sovereignty, a lot of agency, despite being a small country that traditionally has been bullied by Iraq, which is one of the reasons that America intervened in Kuwait and in Iraq. So Jordan is one of those countries that has close ethnic familial ties with the Palestinians and should be very sympathetic to the Palestinians, but unfortunately the royal family of Jordan is just not putting in enough effort to help out the Palestinian people. Jordan, the country, has received much criticism for its double-edged policies. The double-sided policies. The king and queen of Jordan have publicly condemned Israel and denounced plans to move Gazans to the Sinai Desert. Good. Initially, there were widespread demonstrations within the country, but now these are being prevented. The country has recalled its ambassadors to Israel, but has refused to sever ties. So they don't care about the Palestinian genocide going on. Additionally, that has permitted the installation of American air defense systems and the establishment of American air bridge to Israel. Okay, so we're seeing that in Saudi Arabia and Jordan, they are actively working to stop the Iraqis and the Yemenis from shooting missiles at Israel, which could help the Palestinian people to slow down the genocide of the Palestinian people. Just horrific things from Jordan and Saudi Arabia here. It has also informed Yemen and other actors that it will not allow the use of its airspace for an attack on Israel. However, they're still allowing the Israelis and Americans to use Jordanian airspace and Jordanian bases on Jordanian land for conducting operations against Palestinians and Palestinian allies. So really shocking to see Jordan do this. However, the country is home to many Palestinians, and there's growing discontent between the public and government officials. Next up is Morocco. Morocco, the country is committed to preserving its normalization with Israel by any means. There's growing public anger at the king, and many have condemned the country's foreign policy. So I really think that a lot of these world leaders, there's blackmail material on them. I think they've been Jeffrey Epstein, because Jeffrey Epstein obviously worked for Mossad. And so these leaders are not doing the will of the people because they are afraid of the blackmail material that Israel has on them. There's growing public anger at the king, and many have condemned the country's foreign policy. Initially, large protests in support of Palestine had occurred, but these were quickly banned. However, in defiance, larger protests in cities such as Rabat were held. The country is a wild card, though. It is providing support to Palestinians in the UN. There's not much action occurring, and many analysts are not sure if the country can take action given the king's loyalty. So, loyal to Israel instead of loyal to the Muslim people. Next up is Algeria. Algeria, a bit of a surprise here. They're doing a little bit more than I expected, but they have been passionate about their resistance to French colonialism, so maybe they understand the Palestinians as a kindred spirit here. So Algeria, at the start of the conflict, the country issued a condemnation of Israel, but largely adopted a doesn't concern me policy. The government was busy in domestic issues and the planting of trees. However, in recent days, the momentum has grown within the government and has issued a condemnation of Israel's military actions. The Algerian parliament, this is an interesting point, has also unanimously voted to provide President Tebboune with the authority to go to war with Israel. However, this is non-binding and seen by many analysts as a cosmetic measure to quell domestic unrest of the government's inaction. Okay, so what this tells me is that if, say, a country like Turkey ended up going to war with Israel, that Libya or that Algeria would be a country that may also follow along. So they're really waiting to see if another country does something before they do something. Is Turkey on this list? Okay, it is on this list, so we'll get that in a second. Libya, the country has seen significant widespread demonstrations in support of Palestine, and you would see a lot more support for Palestine, and you would see Libya probably directly getting involved if Gaddafi was still around, but the United States and Israel overthrew him. The situation is complex as there are striking differences between government factions. If you recall, the foreign minister was suspended after an illegal meeting with Israeli officials a few months ago. However, there is a growing sentiment that the country cannot stand idly by. The Libyan High Council of State has called for the severing of relations with countries that support Israel's bombardment, and the country has said it is willing to provide military support in case of a regional war. Okay, so another country that if Turkey decided to take the initiative, I think they would probably get involved as well. So Algeria and Libya. Next up is Tunisia. The country has condemned Israel's actions, and there have been wide-scale demonstrations in support of Palestine. The country, prior to the conflict, had been debating in parliament on a bill that would criminalize the normalization of economic and political ties with Israel. So a high treason charge. However, there's a government pushback to modify it to allow for future relations, and a vote on the bill was postponed. Unfortunate, very unfortunate, because this would be a great time to consider that high treason to work with Israel. So I think we have a few more countries left. Oh, wow, they have a lot of countries left. Okay, so next up is Turkey, which I think is probably the most important country right now for this situation, because it's really up to Erdogan if he's going to take on a leadership role, take the initiative here. So Erdogan has held large rallies in support of Palestinians, and true to his political style, has issued harsh condemnations of Israel and promised to declare the state a war criminal. The country has recently recalled its ambassadors to Israel, good, but refused to sever ties, very unfortunate. Many analysts state that the local elections are coming up in the country, and Erdogan is appealing to his voter base. Turkey is still providing oil and food to Israel and is allowing the transfer of other goods, including from Azerbaijan. Many say Erdogan is using the moment to force the U.S. into negotiations on other issues such as Syria, F-35s, to keep the country outside of war. So really disappointing that they're still providing oil and food to Israel here. So Turkey, it just needs better leadership. The leaders right now are cowards. They should be doing more because this is former Ottoman Empire territory. Next up is Egypt. Egypt is another one of those countries that they really stand to lose a lot if Israel gets its way, because they're going to have to give up the Sinai Peninsula to create a refugee crisis within Egypt. It just doesn't make sense for Egypt to do that, but Israel is putting pressure on them. And Egypt, the government is really not controlled by the people anymore. It's controlled by America. So we will see what they're doing here. Let's see. The country is in a challenging position. Initially, it had seen widespread demonstrations in support of Palestine, but fearing another overthrow, the government cracked down on the protests. At the start of the conflict, there was heavy pressure by the U.S. and Israelis on Egypt to take in over 1 million refugees from Gaza. However, the government adamantly refused. Israel has also offered to pay off the entirety of Egypt's debt, likely with American money. So that's how much America is controlled by Israel in return for taking refugees. Another reason that Egypt doesn't want to take in these people, aside from the fact that it'd be complicit in genocide, is the fact that the Palestinians, the Gazans, are very pro-Hamas, and Hamas originated from the Muslim Brotherhood. And Egypt, the current government, has a lot of hostility towards the Muslim Brotherhood, who's trying to overthrow the current government. And so, obviously, this doesn't make sense, but you see a ton of people who are pro-Israel saying, well, there must be something wrong with the Palestinians if the people around them don't want to take them in. And it's just a ridiculous statement if you understand anything about the history of Palestine, of Gaza, of the surrounding region. Okay, so Egypt is in intense negotiation to allow more aid into Gaza via the Rafah border. It has privately reprimanded U.S. officials for not doing everything they can to resolve the humanitarian crisis. The government understands it is at a crossroads. It does not want to take refugees, as it perceives this as an ethnic cleansing by Israel and a security threat, but knows Israel's military strategy will lead to this outcome. The Egyptian prime minister has also said the country is prepared to sacrifice millions of lives to ensure that no one encroaches on its territory. Analysts have said that there is a possibility that if pushed to the brink, Israel may have to militarily challenge Israel in order to preserve its own strategic interests. I hope they would in that scenario, but I really think that, again, they're just kind of waiting on Turkey to take the lead here. It's just so pathetic how these countries are all just waiting on someone else to take the lead. And really, as you're going to see in the next two paragraphs, instead of the Sunni countries and the Sunni regional powers taking a lead, they're just kind of waiting on the Shias to be defenders of the Islamic faith. Just really pathetic. They should feel demasculated. They should just feel like really pathetic over all this. So anyways, Lebanon and Hezbollah. In a recent speech, Sayed, I cannot pronounce, I remember hearing it earlier, but Sayed Nasrallah stated the Hezbollah is at war with Israel since the 8th of October, and that the group will increase its attacks and go on a full spectrum war with Israel if either Lebanon is attacked or Hamas faces defeat in Gaza. It has also threatened American naval assets in the region. Nasrallah is trying to manage a very complex situation. The Lebanese government and other Arab states have demanded it stops escalation. Other groups, such as the Druze, are creating domestic challenges for it. Oh, okay. So something I didn't know there. Lebanese government, other Arab states, and the Druze minority are trying to stop Hezbollah from getting involved. So unfortunate that various leaders of primarily Sunni factions are stopping the Shias from protecting Muslim people, the Muslim community around the world. But Nasrallah understands that inaction at this stage would dismantle the axis of resistance deterrence. And so the group is willing to take the fight to Israel. The group has recently used more advanced weapons such as drones and surface-to-surface missiles, which indicates escalation will not stop. Lebanese government has also prepared wartime contingencies as it's preparing for war. There's a level of coordination with Iran and allegedly Iranian fighters, and military personnel are already stationed within the country. Okay, so taking all of these together, Iran, Iraq, Yemen, Syria, more of the Shia axis. They're really working cohesively with Iran as the nexus of the axis of resistance, is working diplomatically to avoid war. You might be wondering why that's the case when they are so clearly as prepared as possible for a war, given the circumstances. It's because of the fact that they understand that time is on their side, and so they don't have to go to war to defeat Israel and the United States. They just have to wait for the United States to collapse, and then Israel is on its own. And I think that's the reason Israel and the United States are going wild right now all across the international scene, is because they recognize that their time is nearly at their end, and so they're trying to do as much as possible before decline really sets in their countries. And you saw this with World War II as well, where Germany kind of recognized that it was a descending power, and it said, it like had one last hoorah to see if they could make things work. And you're seeing that with the United States right now, where it's like, it's just picking a fight with everyone at once in order to see if it can actually topple all of its enemies and survive for, say, another century. I think that's pretty much impossible at this point, but this erratic behavior is pretty expected whenever you see this type of terminal decline. Okay. So for the axis of resistance, there have been increasing attacks on military bases, American military bases from Iraqi groups, threats that more severe attacks can come. Yemenis are fully engaged in the war and have fired drones and ballistic missiles at Israel. Syrian factions have also attacked Israel via the Golan Heights, and also said more attacks are to come. Syria would love to do more, but it hasn't reclaimed all of its own territory yet. It has a variety of rebel factions in its country. The Kurds are trying to separate as much as possible. Syria just does not have the military to actually take things to Israel. Large number of operators of this axis of resistance are gathering around their respective borders and staging areas in case a bigger war breaks out. It is evidently clear that they will act as a unit and are preparing the battleground for all options. And so I'd put Hezbollah with this axis of resistance as well. Then you see countries further away that are not Arabic countries and not like directly involved in the Middle East, which is Malaysia and Indonesia. Both of them Muslim majority countries, very large Muslim countries. They have seen significant protests in support of Palestine, and the governments are providing emergency aid and diplomatic support in the UN. There's continuous work to separate their economies from the US, e.g. along with Thailand. They have signed a tripartite deal to settle bilateral trade in their own currency. So again, decline of the United States dollar here. And that's just going to continue on and on and on, where the United States is just losing on every front, economically, militarily, technologically, diplomatically. So anyways, additional mentions here are the perspectives of the Latin American countries, Bolivia, Honduras, Chile, and Colombia. These countries have either recalled their ambassadors to Israel or have severed ties and have received significant admiration for doing so. So you're seeing actually more tangible things being done by Latin American powers to support the Palestinians than you're seeing from the greater Middle East, the Muslim community, in terms of supporting the Palestinian people. Really shameful. And I've heard from a number of Muslims that they just can't believe that their leaders are this pathetic. So other things this person notes is, it is important to remind you again that there is a full public support in these countries for Palestine, and many are calling for more significant action. Yeah, exactly as I said, that the people are in support of Palestine, but the governments are not. They're American-controlled governments. Second is, I will reserve military analysis for others, but it seems the region is headed towards a larger war. Yeah, we're seeing that across the board. The United States is getting as many assets as it can into the area. China's preparing for a potential war. Iran's preparing for a potential war. Russia's preparing for a potential war. The various other powers in the region are preparing for a war. Some countries are just kind of waiting for others before they get involved in the war. Turkey, Egypt, Algeria, Libya, et cetera, et cetera. And really, a few little things could escalate into an entire world war. The thing is, it's either going to stay just a genocide of the Palestinians where Israel and the United States just massacre children, or it's going to turn into a world war. I don't see it actually just being a regional war, because as soon as it becomes a regional war, it develops into a world war just because of the alliances that have formed, where any regional war would involve Iran. America's made that clear. They're just not allowing Iran out of this. I think Iran, despite their desire to see the suffering of the Palestinians stopped, I think they would like to wait patiently because America's in decline, and that's probably what Russia and China is advising them to do. But if a regional war happens and it involves Iran, I just can't see Russia not getting involved as well. I don't think Russia would allow Iran to be toppled. And because of that, I don't see China allowing Russia to be toppled. And they may not, I don't know how much of an interest they have in Iran, but I can say very definitively, I'd put it at a 99% chance, they just couldn't allow Russia to be toppled. And so anything that escalates into a regional war would inevitably escalate into a world war, in my opinion at this point. So that's what I'll leave you out with this. This was a very long video, but I do think it was informative. This person's perspective on various countries really did elicit some information from me, and it helped me figure out a few things about this conflict, this situation that I didn't know I thought. So If you found this video to be informative as well, please give us a thumbs up. It helps us in the algorithm. Please subscribe to our channel on YouTube and Rumble. We are being suppressed in the YouTube algorithm, and we would appreciate it. We want you to see all the latest content. We have a lot of things we want to say. Please leave us a comment in the comment box below. Questions, concerns, critiques, anything you want to say. I do love to read them. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. Bye.